Mike Southgate. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer for Navro. We're a payments company that specialises primarily in payroll, marketplaces, and investment schemes. I also run a small software company called Software that does transaction monitoring, and I'm on the executive leadership team for AFEP, which is actually, I think, where we met. It would have been through AFEP at an event.
It would have been at an event, yeah. A long time ago, I imagine.
I mean, I've been doing AFEP now for 12 years, possibly, if not more.
Okay, so it might have even been 10 years ago.
Yeah, it might have been from the very early days of that. I mean, look, I'll dive in terms of a funny story. I'll dive into kind of the backdrop of that article, and I will say it came from what can only be described as a nightmare chat with a client who was saying, well, XYZ other provider is doing this, whatever else. And at the end of it, I was so annoyed because obviously when you're dealing with a client, especially in a compliance role, we're not renowned for being client facing for many reasons. But at the end of that, I just sort of needed to vent. Yeah. I wrote the article, left it, didn't post it. First rule of Fight Club: never post your article straight away when you're annoyed. But then a little while later, I did finally get around to posting it. And my CEO did, bless him, message me and say, could you just hold fire on that for a moment until you've simmered down a bit, just check it through, because also there's always a chance the client will be reading it, so could you just hold off on that for a moment? So I did, and actually the time that you read it and self-promoted your delightful podcast on it was after it had been removed and reposted. So
yeah, well, and also, I mean, sometimes I think you have to be very, with all things that kind of end up on the internet,
public domain,
public domain. They are there forever.
Yeah.
And so absolutely, kind of write something, because sometimes if you kind of lean into that, that frustration, it can actually bring out some really kind of creative ideas, but then absolutely pause.
Yeah.
And row back. And I say the article, I recommend reading this article, because actually I'm sure there are lots of people that have been kind of on both sides of that.
I feel like if there isn't a compliance person or even a salesperson that's been in that situation. So for reference here, the article was around like the worst.
Joe, we probably should have. Do you know what? Let's provide a bit of context, right?
Or because context is one of the things I point out in the article, right? True, so it's actually, you do need to have context into what the issue is. We could do the entire episode without saying what it is, and then provide absolutely no context. And then just as we're both getting really annoyed with each other, eventually you could go, oh, for reference, it's this, and it'll turn out that's the key piece of information I needed to unlock. I mean, that's a long journey, and we should have planned that before.
Yeah, we probably should. So if we were going to do that, we probably should have rehearsed that.
Yeah. You wouldn't have raw.
But as we didn't rehearse it, let's do it anyway.
Yeah, because that's totally a sensible idea. More to give the context, obviously. So it was around a compliance officer's favourite question, and what tends to happen in any business, particularly in financial services, is a competitor of yours is doing some piece of activity, or a client has alluded to something that they do with a competitor, and it seems entirely outside of the scope of what your firm is allowed to do, outside of the scope of what the regulations allow, sometimes what is just blazingly completely illegal, and yet a competitor is seemingly able to do it. And out of frustration of being told, no, you can't do it, a salesperson or a CEO or somebody in power will say to a compliance officer, but why is X firm allowed to do it? Why are they able to do it and we can't? Why are you saying no and this other compliance officer is seemingly very happy to allow that to happen? And the article was about kind of why that's an unfair question, the problems it causes, and the sort of ways that we can respond to that as compliance officers. But also just to call out that it is a common question, and for people the other side of that, the non-compliance officers, kind of understand why that's an unfair question, and why in the moment it seems so great. It's the perfect question, but actually it's just a bit of a crap question.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we do, we don't tell people what the title of the episode's going to be until we get them in, And so the title of this episode is, to be fair, leaning into your article, is going to be, do I really have to do that?
I mean, yes, and that's the second follow-on from the question, isn't it? Though, how is X, Y, and Z doing it? Do we really have to do it that way? Because sometimes they don't realise that actually that is the only way.
So let's talk about the context, because I think one of the things that I liked about the article is the way you articulated alternative ways of phrasing that question, and also kind of bringing in, well, actually, you've got no idea really how this competitor is actually getting themselves comfortable. So over to you.
So I mean, we'll start off with the problem, which is one of information asymmetry, right? Something happens, something is existing, a competitor is doing a thing, and from the outside it is near on impossible to work out what it is or how they're doing it or why. Sometimes it's really obvious, and so I'll give you an example actually that came up this morning. Was payouts and payroll to individuals located around the world. How is X firm able to pay out and offer wallets to these individuals in countries where they're clearly not licensed? And 10 minutes of Googling, we discovered they've got a partnership arrangement with somebody who's got a much wider card network, and effectively the payouts are pay to card. It's very simple once you get into. But during that initial conversation, I had no idea. How do I know what a competitor's doing? We've got thousands of competitors. I have no way of knowing exactly what they're doing, how they're doing. So the first thing is around timing. When you ask a compliance officer, you expect perhaps or hope for an answer immediately. And the reality is sometimes they need time to think and cogitate. Yeah. But also their ability to find out information. You guys do consultancy work. You don't, tell everybody how X, Y, Z another firm is doing everything. There is a certain level of secrecy to people's policies, to people's processes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. And there's also different levels of what firms are and aren't allowed to do based on their licensing, based on what their banking counterparties will allow, based on what systems they've got. If they've got a really good whiz-bang monitoring tool, they may be willing to take a little bit more risk. So the issue that we've got from a compliance perspective is looking into a third-party company and trying to establish how they've done something. We may never be able to get to a solid answer, because from the outside they keep certain things, their secret sauce, secret.
And also, I mean, to a certain extent, if let's say I'm a competitor and I've found a way of doing something that you and other compliance officers don't feel comfortable to do, but we feel comfortable with doing it, and here's the legal opinion, and here's the business process, and here's the whiz-bang piece of technology that keeps us on top of
here are the controls,
the risks, and here are the controls. Yeah, I'm never going to tell you that, because why would I? Or why would I give that secret, as you say, that secret source away? But more importantly, it's kind of, people talk about a secret source. Secret source costs money to create.
Yep.
Right, and sometimes, I mean, that's the value. So carry on.
I completely agree. So an interesting example that came up, although this is a much bigger example, is actually around Jane Street Capital and their trading into India. So they were making quite a large amount of money trading in India. Effectively derivatives.
I am very much hoping that if I Google this, I'm going to be able to find it.
You will be able to find it. There are podcasts about it. I do not have access to some weird secret feed of these things. But they were effectively introducing certain types of trade to the general wider public in India and making billions out of it. Billions. And they kept it really, really quiet, really, really secret. And then when it finally did come out, it was during court disclosure, because two of their employees left, went to another firm. They discovered they were using this trading methodology at the new firm, and Jane Street sued to try and block and prevent it. And it was during that legal battle that what they were doing and how they were doing it came into public knowledge.
Yeah.
So they really had spent a humongous amount of money, effort and time trying to protect that secret source. But obviously that's something
intellectual property.
Yeah. They had discovered it, they'd built the processes, they'd worked out this arbitrage or this gap in the market that they could exploit. And they went to great lengths to protect it. But that obviously cost them time, money, effort to develop. No doubt when they first did that trading strategy, there were some missed elements. They probably lost money on the first round of trades in doing that. So they invested the time, effort, and so forth into building that up, and they then protected it.
Isn't it that just good risk management? You kind of know exactly where the boundary is, and you go up to it, but no further. I mean, I'm not advocating that behaviour, but I want to, but I want to explore that a little bit.
Let's ask the question though. When your phrasing that you've just used there appears in Discovery for a court process or on the front page of the Daily Mail.
Oh, the Daily Mail
test.
test.
The Daily Mail test. Everybody's favourite.
Other newspapers are available.
Yeah. Definitely, other newspapers are available. The reality is, though, is in that context is always going to look bad, and the problem is people don't take into account the stylistic nature of the person asking the question, their style, how they present things. They don't necessarily mean do something illegal. They are simply saying, is there another way of doing this, a creative way of doing it, which is legal, but isn't the obvious route? And I think that's the first thing we have to look at, especially now as every meeting, everything said on a podcast as it gets recorded, but everything is now recorded and discoverable and easily formatted in a way. And we're going to lose the context of a CEO asking, is there an alternative way of me doing this? Is there a quicker route? Is there a risk that I can take now that I eventually close later? All of that context is...
Is there a structure that will create a better outcome for our customers? Right.
Exactly. I mean, the intent and the purpose of what you're doing and how you're trying to achieve the goals. And that, I think, is obviously, I haven't actually heard the podcast that you had with Sarah earlier, but it's the intention of the rules and regulations, right? And are you trying to achieve the intent of the rules, but via an alternative method? Or are you just circumventing them and completely ignoring them? Yeah. And that I think, is the key thing that we always need to consider. So whenever you're asking the question, how is someone else doing this? It's not that you're suggesting that we exactly copy them. It's just you are trying to explore those other ways and methods and means of doing something in what you presume is a legal way. Because said other competitor has their own license, they have their own obligations. You presume that what they're doing is completely legal. Yeah. Although, as I do point out in the article, there's always the opportunity that they actually just don't care. Fundamentally, there is always that risk. Yeah,
I mean, they're just completely ignoring it, and all they want to do is make some money. I mean, we can't completely
compete with that either.
And you can't compete with that, and you can't completely ignore that. Yeah. There's always a debate around. I don't know if you're familiar with this term. TTCA versus client money. So title transfer collateral arrangement versus client money.
Not exactly one of my top 5 subjects, but I do understand it.
No, but and we're not going to do a detailed exploration of the difference between those two rules. But there are firms out there that have managed to get very comfortable with TTCA arrangements, and there are other firms out there who have not, and kind of looking at the business models of the two firms from the outside looking in, they look exactly the same. And so that I think that's another example. But kind of what do you kind of think about? What do you think about? I mean, I'm literally doing the thing that your article says not to do, right?
I think,
but I'm doing it deliberately.
Yeah. Well, it's again, we're back to intent. So intent's a great way of looking at how TTCA works and how disclosure works, and the role of disclosure in what we do. Now, if the industry was regulated in a way that required a key facts document, but as you know, in the majority of cases, FX brokerages and so forth actually don't have, payments firms don't have key facts disclosure documents. But if they did, it would probably require that we very clearly draw out how your funds are protected, or in that case, are firm funds, how they become your own money. And I think if people read and understood that fully, then actually TTCA may be less useful as a method for dealing with clients, because clients would inherently go, well, hold on a minute, am I comfortable in leaving my funds with you in this fashion and in this way, knowing that in the event of an administration, this is going to happen, and actually it may not have a great outcome for me. And I think the levels of disclosure of that are very different. Now, the presumption, of course, TTCA can only be used with professional clients, but the presumption is that a professional client will go through and read all of the documentation, will draw out the fact that there's TTCA involved, and go, well, hold on a minute, what are you doing there? Like, how does this work? But the sad reality is people don't read it in that much depth, whereas a key facts document would very clearly say this is how your money is or is not protected.
Although I think there are some, and we'll kind of talk about rules in a minute, but I think there are some rules that say actually you've got to make certain things clear.
Yes,
right?
And there should be a professional. They have to sign away a very specific piece that says we're a professional client. We'd like to be treated as a professional client. But the wording of that, painfully nerdy technical detail here, but I don't believe the wording of that says, by the way, I'm a professional and I sign away some of my rights. And by the way, we're using TTCA, so your money's mine now. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So let's pull ourselves back from that, because the reason that the reason that I brought it up was because it's another example of where actually firms can reduce the cost of doing business, not just the kind of not just the kind of the cost of complying with the rules and the cost of the audit and all this kind of stuff, and actually literally the cost, the cost of funding. They can use TTCA to reduce those costs, and so then when you kind of take that idea, I think that getting comfortable with that and those sort of things, I think that is your secret sauce that you're talking about. So firms that have done it have spent a lot of money doing it.
They have, and it has presumably as part of the rules, it has a perfectly legitimate reason as to why it exists, and there is a purpose for it, and maybe it reduces settlement times down, or reduces the times needed to trade between certain counterparties. There are many reasons as to why it could exist, and fundamentally, it's a moral hazard thing. Like, firms should be allowed to utilise that, and clients should be able to utilise firms that use that method if they so wish to do so. But again, it's about disclosure and making sure that everybody knows. And I think that's where we're getting to. We're back to the intent. What was the purpose of the legislation, and what are we trying to achieve? Is that achieving the best outcome for the customer? Now, if that results in you being able to pass those cost savings on to your customers and offer them a better product and trade with them in a way that they could not do with, say, a high street bank, fantastic. You've achieved a great customer outcome, and you've done the right thing by your customer. But again, we're back to the question of whether the customer knows what they're getting themselves into and understands fully the risks.
Okay. So, and how can kind of compliance officer, or compliance officers as a euphemism for a second line function, right? How can they kind of preempt that question and kind of go into a forum and say, look, actually, there's no rule that says we can't do this. I can't point you to the rule that says no. This is an interpretation, but let's think about the risks of doing this. Like, if we do this, what would we need to manage, and can we afford to do that? And maybe you can think of an example where actually it started as no, but you got to yes.
You got to a place. I'll start off with actually the advice of the people bringing that question, which is that it's not necessarily an unfair question, but oftentimes it's presented in an unfair way. So it's the last ditch, exasperated question that you ask somebody, well, how the hell is X able to do it, rather than us? If you led with that question, actually, it's a chance to collaborate and to work together. So we're doing a bit of market research. It turns out one of our competitors is offering this product, which allows the following features. Is there a way that we can replicate that? That's a much friendlier, much nicer way of approaching the question.
Yeah, I like the way that question's been put.
Which is delightful, because it's how I pitch questions to other people, because it brings them on side, it makes you feel friendly and collaborative. And then stop or offer an hour and let them think it through, rather than hosing them for a question absolutely immediately. What that does is gives them time to go away and Google the other company, Google the product name, look at the licensing regime they've got, maybe try and find out who their banking counterparties are, because that might give them a little bit of a chance to work out a route or a means, or to basically answer your question. Do the research.
ChatGPT, Gemini, AI.
Again, other AIs are available. But it might give you an opportunity. I say that that sounded dismissive. Actually, genuinely, when I got asked a question earlier, I actually give you the example, which is how is X firm able to pay employees and offer a wallet service to employees overseas? So I started off with, what's the name of the firm? How many jurisdictions are they licensed in? And what became apparent was they weren't licensed in enough jurisdictions to be able to offer the service to all of the customers that we knew they were offering them to. So there must be some sort of alternative route. You can't issue cards globally, you still have to have a license in each jurisdiction. So then I started to look up, and ChatGPT actually was quite useful to tell me who else was partnering with them. It gave me all the regulatory information from all of their websites around the world. I don't speak Swahili, so I wasn't going to go onto their website and find that information. So actually, it gave me a really good summary of their licensing regime and their structure. And then from that gave me potential partners I could work with, other licensing regimes in certain jurisdictions, and also a list of their competitors. So I could look at what other people were doing in the same way. I could also then look at the KYC and the due diligence that everybody was doing and learn what their controls were. Now in this situation, unless I actually follow, from what I can gather, unless I follow what their model, I'm not licensed in those jurisdictions. So I'm not going to be able to get comfortable with doing exactly what they're doing. I'm going to have to bring in partners and other people I can work with. To your point there about like time, cost and energy, I know that is now an absolute humongous product, right? Bear in mind, Navro is 3 years old. We are somewhat going to be chasing other people in terms of features and functionality, and that is a product that they have built over the course of 15 years.
But the way you presented that, so collaborative questioning leads to better outcomes all around, right?
Because also it starts the conversation off on the right foot. So one of the things that I pointed out in the article is whenever that question gets asked, it's always asked at the end of an argument in an exasperated way, which means that you and me probably aren't communicating with each other in the best ways to start with. And the natural reactions, humans' natural reactions of fight or flight, I'm either going to just be like dismissive and say, no, I'm not going to do it, or I'm going to get quite aggressive with you about it. And a compliance officer is just then going to go, no. Or as you said, a euphemism for any second line function is just going, no, you can't do that because you haven't given me time to explore all of the different options. But also, at that point, I think you're we swear on this thing?
It depends what words you use, I
think you're an arsehole.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to want to work with you, and I'm not going to want you to succeed. So I'm going to retract back in, and I'm probably going to think of some regulation that I know that sounds like it would probably prevent you from doing what you want it to do, and you're not going to be able to disprove it. Yeah. And then we're into a bad place. So with a bit of collaboration, and also that gives you the opportunity to tell me more about what you know about the product. What does it do? What features does it offer? Who is the client underlying? And from that, I might be able to work through to a solution that doesn't necessarily copy the other client, the other firms.
But in that kind of startup environment, right, we've got to move fast, right? We've got to move fast. It's got to be safe. But we've got to quote someone who we spoke to a few weeks ago. We've got to move fast. It's got to be safe. You know, how do you balance, or is there even a balance, right? You know, how do you manage these quick fire questions that are coming in when you're chasing revenue and you have to balance, balance is not the right word, right? But that's the word I'm going with, this kind of innovation with actually, we do need some controls around this and we do need to know what we're doing. We do need to understand our risks and how to manage them.
I mean, the first thing is everyone talks about tone from the top, but realistically your founders, your management team are going to be able to have told you what they are comfortable with. They might be fairly open and fairly transparent that they are willing to do all and sundry and take any risks. I'd hope they're not. But they may have a much wider risk appetite than other founders. So the first thing is an open conversation so that you understand the risk appetite of the people that you're working for. That
might be a good idea to do that before you accept the job.
Very much establish that early on. Because also, if you don't understand that, you don't know that, you from a compliance perspective may be you may be mismatched in what you're expecting and what you think the firm is going to do, and then actually they come along, they pitch an idea, and you go, this is crazy, this is completely illegal, we're never going to be able to do it. And the founders are there going, that's what we hired you for, and you're like, no, that's not what I understood. So very much you actually establish that before you start working with them. If you can speak to the former compliance person if they're on their way out, or if it is a startup and you're the first in, very much establish that conversation with your founders.
3 things that all compliance officers should be able to do and 3 things that compliance officers should never do.
So, the first thing a compliance officer should always be able to do is pull a ripcord and say, no, stop, this is wrong, this is too much. Should be able to have a quiet conversation with the CEO, because the last thing you want is, in the event that there's this massive series of arguments and raging conversations going round, is for the room and the team to gang up on you and for you to have no exit and no way out.
Yeah.
So you should always have, compliance officers should always have the ability to sort of ripcord and say, look, stop, pause this, we'll come back to it, or to be able to then go and address the CEO directly and say, this is what's being proposed, this is what I'm being asked to do, these are the risks, without the wider universe being able to weigh in and shout them down. So that should always be, even if that's via WhatsApp, and you have the opportunity to just message them and go, it's like, problem with this, I'm a little bit worried about this. They should always have the opportunity to address the board in terms of controls and extra things that they want to put in place. And from that, they should have the ability to pull the plug when those things are not delivered. So if I say we can go and do X, Y, and Z, but you've got to find me this partner or this product, or I've got to have this number of staff or these people.
So we can do this if that.
Yeah.
Okay.
If this, then this, and then when that fails to deliver, or if it's delayed, or if the whole thing goes and gets blown out of proportion, then we need to be able to stop it. There's a great phrase inside of development world called scope creep, which is where you give me a thing that you want to do, and then it grows and it grows and it grows, and before you know it, it's like, well, we're going to issue prepaid cards to these people. Now we're going to issue them to these people, and now we're issuing them overseas, and then it grows and it grows and it grows, and you've still got this janky old spreadsheet that you're using to do your monitoring, and the controls have never caught and never, you know.
Yeah, we'll talk about ERMI in a sec.
There we go.
Yeah.
Shamelessly plugging everything. Yeah. And I think a third thing for a compliance officer always should be able to do. I think they should always be able to dig into how something is actually working post-event and post, development. Because all too often what happens is we develop a system, we build a system out, we sort of leave it, and then we go away, and we don't then go back in afterwards and dig in. And I think
that does sound like compliance monitoring. Sounds what you're describing.
It is, but firstly, that doesn't always happen.
Okay.
And secondly, it doesn't always happen to a complete level. So compliance monitoring may be me going back to operations and saying, are you doing the KYC and the due diligence and everything else that you needed to do? How many compliance officers do you think are digging into the systems in any real depth and actually following the whole thing through from start to finish? Now, we're seeing that a lot more now with operational resilience. That's given everybody an opportunity to do a whole big bunch of mapping of all of their systems. But I discovered we've got all of these plugins, all of these tools, all of these systems. Didn't necessarily know what they did.
I mean, that was great. You went to operational resilience and there was no prompting from me. That was brilliant.
You can tell what the current trend is, right?
Yeah.
But if you take all the IT systems, IT will have a bunch of tools and a bunch of systems that they use that we may not necessarily understand. And I don't know whether that system is getting data from our clients or about our clients. I don't know if it's just a software tool. I don't know if it's actually just a hardcore version of Grammarly that's correcting somebody's spelling. But the operational resilience has given us that entire process has given us an excuse, more really a reason, to dig into every single part of the flow from start to finish and understand the whole thing end to end.
So what started?
Useful.
So what started as what? Okay. So what might have started in an exercise in regulatory compliance became something that actually delivered real business value. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
I love the idea of that, and I honestly believe it as well. But it's really nice to hear someone say that unprompted.
I mean, it's a hard one to admit, because also when you admit, you realise the amount of time, effort and energy that you've taken away from people, saying to them, sorry, I know you've been doing your job perfectly well for the last 5 years. Now, systems have never fallen over. God bless AWS last week. But our systems have never fallen over. But actually, I really like to dig into everything that we've got along the way.
We'll come back into 3 things that a compliance officer should never do. But before we go there, so this ability to pull the ripcord, and you kind of described that having that relationship with the CEO, so that you can speak to them if you're not privately. does that mean that the senior compliance officer should report directly to the CEO? I have a view on that, but I'd be interested on yours.
I think it depends. The problem is, I was chatting to somebody recently about the various different lines of defence and how they worked, and they were asking, is it possible for this team to report into this person? And actually, it doesn't matter what the job title of that person is. It doesn't matter what the team is. It depends on the person. I was would you believe it, a bit of an upstart 20 years ago when I first started out in compliance, and I could have reported into the receptionist, but if I thought there was something wrong, damn well everybody would have known about it. I was not going to keep that quiet. It's actually genuinely amazing I've still got a compliance career given my attitude back then, but it was very much, I think I'm protecting the business.
I mean, we are amazed as well.
Too many podcasts, I'll be in cancel culture territory. But the reality was, it didn't matter who I reported to. I would have been able to express to the wider business that they were taking, to my mind, too many risks, or this client was unacceptable. And I think that is missing inside of the general ideas of the three lines of defence and the sort of theoretical ways that they could operate. You can have a compliance officer reporting into the head of legal or into the CEO, as long as when they express an issue with the person above them, or to the person above them, and it gets heard and it gets listened and it gets actioned, it doesn't necessarily matter. It is easier though if you have that direct reporting line. But I will say, it's not necessarily that it's a direct reporting line, it's just a means of contacting and for the CEO to actually listen. And I sort of joked about WhatsApp, but realistically, if that is the way that you've got, and you've got that line, that ripcord, you can just message them, and it's the only time you've ever messaged them and they listen.
And sometimes these informal relationships are, if not as important, sometimes more important than perhaps the formal ones. Okay, right. 3 things that a compliance officer should never do, and we're going to completely discount take a bribe, right?
I would presume that was there was the unwritten. I think the first thing is like dealing with a lawyer. You never want a lawyer's first answer. You also don't want a compliance officer's first answer. And actually, it's not in our interest in compliance to express that first answer. If somebody gives you a problem, just blurting out the first thing that comes into your head is either going to get you in trouble because it was wrong.
Yeah.
It's going to cause an argument. So you should never just give your first unfilled answer. Always take a bit of time to think it through, think of the intent, think of all of the other things that are going on.
So are you saying kind of compliance officers are like plumbers? Right, you've got to kind of scratch your chin.
Just
and
roll it over.
This is going to cost £1 million.
I can't say I've ever thought of the analogy in that way, but in a way, yes, because actually plumbers' quotes and estimates are so bad, and that's because they give you their first answer. They don't give you time to think about it, and then they go away, and then they actually do the job, and they realise there's all of these other things that are involved, and that, it causes a bad relationship between you and the client, or you and the business later on when you come back and you revise your estimates. So to a degree, yes, I think actually, you should take a little bit of time, be able to pull together all of the information before you give a definitive answer.
Well, at this point, I better say, the plumber that we use is fantastic. Never scratches their chin, always delivers on time. Because I definitely don't want to get cut off by them, right? So
it turns out your plumber's following you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and with hindsight, I probably should have thought with a better example, but I think we could. But
I think we're in the same place with it, which is that if you just give your first gut feel answer, or your first quote, and you haven't had time to properly consider things, you're going to make mistakes, and that's either going to land you in a lot of hot water, or it's
like what I just did. I just allowed my extroverted tendencies. So it came into my head, and then it just came out of my mouth.
Home and your boiler's going to be leaking water everywhere, and you're not going to.
And it'll be my own fault. All right, because I didn't manage those risks properly.
Exactly.
And I said the first thing that came into my head.
There you go. Yeah. And I'll segue that painfully into number 2.
Brilliant.
Which is, don't overstate either your knowledge, your skills, your experience. Now, part of that is, to be fair as well, my first answer is an extension of number 1. But don't.
Number 2 sounds like don't lie.
Actually, it really is. Don't lie.
Don't lie.
Don't know something.
Yeah.
Don't try and guess your way through it, fudge your way through it. But also, don't try and be a master of all things. There is going to be a point where you are going to run into the full extent of the limits of your knowledge.
Yeah.
And if you just carry on waffling and keep talking and pretending, then you're going to run into problems. Now, I say that as somebody who unfortunately delivers everything with utter confidence. I don't know if you noticed, before you came in here, you went out and got some coffees. The sky has now turned green, and pigs are flying. And there is a risk that if you say things and if you lie or if you elaborate or if you overstate your knowledge in an area with too much confidence, everybody's gonna realise. But you've dug yourself into a hole then, and it is much safer and much easier to just go, I've no idea. I don't know what the laws are in Uzbekistan. I don't know if we can do business there.
Yeah.
But if you sort of fluff and wobble or lie, you're either going to get found out or it's going to cause you problems. And people
so actually, and the, if you like, the business people that we work with, because we work with as many kind of so-called kind of front office people as we do with control functions people. You know, I think the more senior you get, the more you appreciate. Just give it to me straight.
Yeah.
Because I haven't got time for bullshit.
And that answers whether we're allowed to swear on this.
Well, yeah.
But you're right. Look, they haven't got time for it, and the mistake of half building something which it turns out you've built on bad foundations is going to end up costing you more money, more time. If there was a client expecting something that is then not available, it's going to be a risk. Or if you build it and it turns out it was wrong, you know, you're risking the fines and all of the negative things that we all know about.
So we said, like, don't take a bribe. That's zero.
Rule zero.
Rule zero. Rule one, consider your response carefully. Don't just blurt stuff out.
Yeah.
Rule two, don't overstate, don't lie. Kind of be really clear about where your boundaries of knowledge are. So number three.
I'm going to say it as a don't, but it really probably should have been in the first list, which is don't be afraid to ask colleagues, friends, co-workers, your network.
Yeah.
So we'll give you another example. I had a guy came to talk to us about doing X, Y, Z business. He was somebody who was at a firm, which then split off to another firm. And he presented quite confidently in that delightful way that I just told you the sky was green, that he didn't need
I mean,
to
I was there, right? I was there. Sky's green, done.
Global warming's a hell of a thing. You never know what's going to happen, right? But he presented quite confidently that he didn't need to do X, Y, and Z thing. And I had no good, solid argument. I had no way of countering what he had suggested, because it was his area of expertise, his field, his thing that he'd been doing for 20 years. And again, reached out eventually to a bunch of colleagues who worked at other firms who I knew worked in the same sector and the same industry that he was talking about, and said, I've been told this. Is that right? Is it wrong? And I think too often people will worry that they're going to lose credibility in the wider industry, or that people are going to think they're idiots, they don't know what they're doing. But actually the ability to reach out and ask that question shows, I would hope, because I'm the one who did it, that it shows a sign of maturity, integrity, a desire to learn.
Yeah. Just say you don't know.
Just say you don't know.
Do you know what? I don't know. Maybe I should.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I'm going to go and find out.
Yeah. I'll give you a better example, actually. So I build cars when I'm bored. And who doesn't, right? I have no idea how to spray a car. So I went into a paint shop and I tried to say to the bloke, I need this, 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 and this. And he looked at me like I was an idiot, because the things I'd asked for were not compatible with each other.
Yeah.
Left the shop feeling like a real plum. Went somewhere else. Right? It's that embarrassing. I mean, car body shops are full of the sort of people who work in trade. They're not necessarily, expecting some random person in off the street. Went to another place and said, I'm trying to achieve this. What do I need to do? And it was the most helpful guy. It was like, well, you need this to start with. You need to prep the body this way. You need to do this. Then it's this paint, and this is compatible with this. But you're going to need to bring a bit of the car in, because paint codes are useless. And I learned so much from just asking that guy a question.
Yeah, and good people are generous with their knowledge.
They are. And I suppose 3.5, don't be stingy with your knowledge and your time and your experience.
Yeah.
We are all here inherently. This is the come to Jesus moment. We are all here inherently to protect customers and make the world slightly better. Protect people from bad actors and so forth. And our knowledge, if we share it, will allow that to to happen.
All right. So let's then now talk about being generous with your knowledge versus protecting your IP.
Yeah, that's a slight problem because realistically, compliance officers know all of the gubbins of how a firm works and what firms can and cannot do. But realistically, most of the questions that you get asked are not about your deep secret source. They are, do I need to KYC X, Y, and Z person? And yes, you do.
I mean, that does feel like. I mean, I know we were talking about KYC earlier today, and I mean that does. I mean, I'll be honest. I mean, that feels like a very basic question. You know, the answer to do I need to KYC this person? Well, yeah, they own more than a certain percentage of this company.
I'll give you an example then, right? So, I want to do work in the maritime industry. Who do I need to KYC in that situation? There's a company that owns a boat. There's a manager that does the boat. There's a guy at the end of it who actually physically owns the boat. JMLSG guidance doesn't really give you a lot about the full structure and about what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. So what do you do? What do you do where there's no rules and no guidelines in these kind of areas of grey?
If you want to be really sad, you take the EBA legislation or the EU legislation and you read the preamble. And at the start of that,
I don't think that's sad. I think in your role, that's absolutely the right thing to do.
You might be a selected audience. In fact, I'm rather hoping that everybody else who's watching this is a selected audience because they'll be like,
well, they've switched off. As soon as you said EBA preamble,
exactly.
Everyone went to sleep. But actually so we're going to spend a little bit more time on that because actually that's really important. You know, we were talking about not overstating your knowledge. Not giving people bullshit. I managed to do every episode, and it's without swearing, and I'm a little bit swearing, right? And you turn up, and suddenly I'm swearing, right?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, but anyway, getting back to that.
He's going to start risk ranking his guests.
Yeah, well, yeah, high risk. I need to do EDD on you, I think. Yeah. So the so coming back to that is that right? You know, don't overstate your knowledge. So actually, if you are in a compliance role, in a senior compliance, you do need to go and read that. Yeah. Not put it into ChatGPT. You actually need to go and read it yourself, understand it, maybe discuss it with your colleagues, and actually create that bandwidth in your in your day or week, month to actually go and get that knowledge, so that you can really kind of digest it, so that you're ready. You're ready to answer the question.
I think that's also a really good point about your wider team. So one of the things that I do to my team, I'm not entirely sure whether I do it to them or for them. They'll decide. I'll put a poll in one of the Slack channels later on and ask them whether they enjoy this or not. But we do sometimes get together with a really meaty subject and go, everybody read it, like a book club. We'll all come back and we'll discuss it. We'll discuss it after. That is quite resource intensive. And as you said, you do need to sometimes carve that time out. The slight problem there is, from a business perspective, the compliance team all spending 2 hours reading the same policy or the same piece of legislation and then having a discussion probably looks like a really inefficient way of doing it. But actually, compared to the cost of going out and getting a legal opinion, which would also take me 2 or 3 hours to brief the lawyer, to get all the details to them, give them all the context, give them all the understanding, and then get an answer, plus their billing time for it. Actually using your internal resources and the people inside of your business who know and understand the business, they know what controls it has or hasn't got, actually is a really useful way of doing it.
And that creates in-house capability.
It does.
Which you can then build on.
Yeah, and
that's
the excuse I always use for my junior teams is, well, this is upskilling you, you're learning a new thing, and I'm yet to work out whether they appreciate this approach or not.
Well, you do your poll in the Slack channel, and I'm sure you'll find out.
I'll let you
So spending the time to build in-house capability, thinking about the EBA preamble, but then bringing that as a euphemism for technical detail, right? Bringing that back into the organisation, sitting down with the output from the Operational Resilience Programme, where you can actually see
what it's like in action,
the processes, the controls, and actually what your business as usual BAU actually looks like, and then applying that knowledge in the context of your business to get the right answer. Or, actually, do you know what, we need some more information.
That is always the possibility is you'll get to the end of all of that and you either won't have a clear and comprehensive answer, or you still won't have worked out a way of doing it, and you just have to reach out to expertise.
But you'll reach out to expertise, I guess,
With
at a better from a better position.
Absolutely, in a better position to either understand the problem better, or you understand the limitations better. Because the last thing you want to do is reach out to a third party and say, "Can you give me advice on this?" It's a wide-reaching question when you already know that getting yourself licensed and registered in a bank probably isn't an option.
Okay. So when you came in today, because I know we kind of surprised you with this a little bit, we didn't give you a lot of notice. So was there anything that you came in and said, you know what, I'm going to spend some time. It's going to be relatively public, depending on how many likes it gets, right? So I really, really want to get this message across. You know, I know we kind of brought you in to talk a little bit about the article and around it. So if you wanted to really provide more context about that article, or if you just wanted to talk about something completely random, you know, here's your opportunity. You know, 2 or 3 minutes. Let's talk about whatever you want to.
I mean, we've got a PR company that's helping us with the pitching stuff around me, and I think they'd be annoyed with me if I didn't at least bring that up. I think actually what I'd like to talk about really is that people's perceptions of KYC and everything else is really front-loaded, and all of the due diligence is really front-loaded. And when we talk about in the article, kind of how does X do this, everybody always really concentrates really, really heavily on the KYC, the due diligence, and the license. And that's because they can't see those things in the back end. They can't see the transaction monitoring, the sanction screening, the ongoing quality assurance, or anything else that they've got there. And so really, if you gave me 3 minutes, I'd evangelise quite heavily about the benefits of ongoing screening, ongoing monitoring, and the tools and things that you can use to monitor your clients. Because sometimes it's not possible to get all of the information that you require upfront in due diligence. Sometimes you are reliant upon ongoing monitoring, ongoing screening, all of those kind of fun things. And aside from the LinkedIn article, obviously we've got a blog series on transaction monitoring, and it's the 101s of transaction monitoring.
Yep.
And that really boils down to, what is your product risk? How does your product work? What does it do? Getting a better understanding of your product, which you will get through operational resilience and through mapping the whole thing end to end. And then deeply understanding the financial crime risks of your product, because that then allows you to build transaction monitoring rules and ongoing screening that actually targets the risks associated with your product. I think everybody always assumes that transaction monitoring is one homogenous thing. You just buy 12,000 monitorings of transactions and throw it at the system and it will find you criminality, or I can just throw AI at it and it will find me all of the problems.
It'll probably create new ones, actually.
It probably will, because it will generate a hell of a lot of alerts and hits. But we know from those preambles that the intention of all of those rules, financial crime rules, is to prevent financial crime. We know that we're supposed to carry out a product risk assessment, a client risk assessment, and everything else. And then we know that that is supposed to drive an actual achievement and an outcome and a result with your monitoring that achieves those objectives.
Yeah. Although we've been talking a little bit today with other people about changing the terminology that we use in the with respect to risk assessments. So I can't take credit for this, but we're going to call
Very
them.
honest of you
we're going to call it, we're going to call it threat hunting. And so, and actually, while I was thinking about kind of what is the new name for risk assessments, I was thinking actually threat hunting adventure. How do you like that? Threat hunting adventure.
It sounds like a choose your own. Remember the books as a kid where you go through and it would go, pick page 49 or pitch page 50. You always leave your finger in there just so you could go back and case it.
I think threat hunting adventure. So do you know what I think? We're getting told to Simon, wrap it up. But before we do, I want to say a big thank you for coming in at short notice. Feel free to plug your article as much as you can, as you want to, and when we put this out, repost your article as well. Shamelessly plug your products on the back of our post.
Of course,
it's only fair.
We provide a fixed price transaction monitoring tool. Absolutely no upper limits and thresholds on how many transactions. Great for startups.
Yeah, there we go. Great. You heard which I don't even know which camera I'm looking at now, but that was great. That was a great plug. We'll probably keep that in. Probably. But before we let you go, we'd really like to do something called Myth Truth.
innovation and compliance are inherently at odds.
Myth.
The more data we have, the less judgment we use.
Myth.
Independence matters more than influence.
Gonna have to rush you.
Yeah. Truth. But I will caveat that because of a specific example from my history. So, at some point you always had, back to that ripcord, at some point you always have to be independent.
Yeah, that's good context actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not in the context and the keeping with your game, but it's it's useful.
Yeah.
The more detailed the policy, the safer the fund.
Myth.
Then governance stifles growth.
Myth.
And last one, you can automate compliance.
Myth.
Great. Thank you very much. Really nice to see you again, and
As always, you too.
it's just been great.